I am Dan Reinhardt. I'm the president of Crest Leadership, and I've been doing this now for almost 20 years with people just like you, having these conversations and life development experiences called the Crest Leadership Program. And as part of what we do, we like to bring in expert guests, like our guest today, Marvin Brubacher. Marvin has been a college president, a pastor, and well, I don't know what else. There's quite a bit that he's done. So he's had a very rich and varied career, but some real long-term commitments to like the presidency, like I think it was 20 some years there. But all the way along, one factor you need to know about Marvin is that he has been a mentor. He's been mentoring people all along. Like this is kind of a lifestyle, and he's developed a very good practical way of doing it. So if there's anybody that I would like to come and coach all of us how to do mentoring better, I can't think of a better person than Marvin. So welcome, Marvin, Director of Mentorly Canada, to our webinar here.
Oh, Dan, it's great to be here, and it's great to see some of the people that are on the screen with us. Some I know, some I don't know, but maybe let's go a little easy on the expert part, because this is an ongoing, lifelong learning experience. I keep getting surprised every time when I enter into mentoring relationships, but it is a passion of mine and something that I enjoy doing. And thank you for the privilege of being with you on this webinar, Dan.
Oh, it's great. Really good to have you here, because this topic of mentoring is really important, because if we, who are, most of us on this call, I would say are in the second half of life, probably 40 plus. And if there's going to be a good raising up of leaders, we've got to be willing to mentor. But most probably of you on the screen here have not had a mentoring experience. Maybe you have, but in my conversation with people, many will say, man, I've not really had that. So we're not exactly sure how to do this. So for this reason, it's really good to have someone who's had experience on this to help us understand how in the world we need to do this. So Marvin, let's have you start this off. What are a couple of reasons that people are not wondering if they can even mentor or not?
Yeah, well, that was a good introduction, Dan, to the generality, and this is not intended to put anybody down, but the generality of we're talking primarily Christian world, is that mentoring is talked a lot about, but there's not a lot of history of doing it well. And so this younger generation actively wants to be mentored. But the older generation that you and I are part of never experienced it. And so we're hesitant. And so as I talk to people, there's two basic things that they call reasons for not mentoring. Okay. One is they say, I don't have time to mentor. Well, that to me is not a reason. That's an excuse, because all of us have time to do the things that we prioritize in life. And hopefully this webinar and the start of a conversation will help people move mentoring to a higher level of priority in their life, because that's going to be essential leadership in the kingdom of God. What is a reason is I don't know how. And so we're going to try and answer a few of the questions that might be bubbling up in people's minds today that will get them a start on how you can do this. And at the end, of course, I'll offer myself to be a greater help.
Yeah, boy, you'll want to wait to the end of this webinar, folks. Marvin's got a great offer he's going to make for us all. So Marvin, just give us a bit of an overview. What are the key outcomes that will be today in the webinar?
Yeah, so we're going to try to give an overview of what mentoring is, and we're going to try and help people. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the biblical foundation, because it flows out of the Great Commission, and we're to help people learn to obey God in everything. Well, that takes time and energy, and works best in some close personal relationships, either one-on-one or one in a small group. But we're going to give an overview of what mentoring is and a way to connect with people about this and how to connect mentoring into the concepts of discipleship and leadership training, and maybe an underlying of some of the basic transformations of the heart a person needs to embrace if they're actually going to make this a serious part of their life. So that's what we're going to try and do, Dan.
Boy, that's a lot to cover. So let's get right at it. Now I'm going to share the screen here. We've got a good diagram that Marvin's created here.
Yeah, well, just so everybody knows, I didn't create it, but this is part of the organization that it's a network that I embrace called MentorLink. And this tells the story in a graphic way of what we're facing in the world today. And in the world today, more people are being saved than ever before. So we've got this exponential curve of believers coming into faith. We have a less exponential curve of churches starting. The big challenge is we have this shortfall of leaders, and leadership training is just barely more than flatlined. And that's all kinds of training. So this is what we want to address. And we believe a mission would be that we want to develop leaders to lead like Jesus. It's the critical need of the church. And that we would like to see that every believing community had effective leaders and every leader had an effective Christ-centered mentor, because that's how it's going to work. And that's the way Jesus did it. So that's the need we're trying to address and put some steps there to overcome and actually change that flat line of leadership development.
You know, and Marvin, in talking with mission leaders, in my conversations with them, that shortfall around the globe is massive.
Mm-hmm.
It is really a major problem. But
Yeah.
It's not just in overseas, it's here, right here in North America as well. In fact, when I listen to denominational leaders, they talk about all of the vacancies they have in their churches for pastors. In fact, there's one denominational leader in just BC alone. 17 churches are looking for pastors.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that comment, Dan, but I want to make sure everybody on this call realizes I am equally interested, in fact, maybe more interested in equipping church leaders to reproduce leaders in their churches or in organizations. So yeah, there's this important quality of mentoring in formal education, preparing people for formal ministry. But I think equally more and maybe more important is us equipping lay leaders. I hate that term, but people in the church who aren't being paid to do ministry to equip leaders in that level, because that to me is where the greatest shortfall is. But back to that diagram, you don't need to put it up again. That reality is what drove MentorLink to ask the big question: how do we overcome that problem? What are we going to do to change that?
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in just a minute, but I'll just give the little clue is there has to be a heart change. It's the only way it's going to happen, because so often existing leaders do not raise up younger leaders because they are threatened by younger leaders. And so while everywhere in the world there are leaders, the existing leaders are not reproducing. And that is true here in North America too, not just around the world.
So that's a message for us on this call, because you're leaders. You are in positions of responsibility and influence. And so it really is, it has to start with us doing this. So this is why we just want to bring Marvin to this audience right here.
So there's some really important reasons, Dan, why mentoring is important. And I just stated one: if we're going to advance the kingdom of God, we have to have more leaders, but the right kind of leaders. And the right kind of leaders are Jesus-style leaders. And the way Jesus did it is different than the way we've done it historically in North America. Never mass-produced leaders. It was always from the many, narrowing it down to the few and selecting those and going deep. But so here's some reasons to get engaged in mentoring. It really demonstrates a willingness. This is one of the greatest demonstrations of a servant attitude. If you'll humble yourself and actually raise up younger leaders, it's one of the greatest demonstrations you are a Christ-like person. And it's one of the greatest ways to learn. I've learned more from mentoring than any other way. And I've read a lot of books and sat in a lot of classrooms. But this is where you learn about life. This is where you learn about what really makes people tick. And the other thing about mentoring that's really powerful is it actually into a relationship. So it's not just some hard, fast external, it's rooted in a relationship, but accountability in our lives is absolutely critical. And so there's a lot, but mentoring, great encouragement. I am so encouraged by mentoring younger leaders. And I can get pretty fired up on this topic because it's been the greatest joy of my life. So
I want to just open it up to some others of you that are on the call here. I'm curious why you came on the webinar.
So over the years, I've been involved in corporate leadership, and they've tried to twice for sure from an HR organizational consultant perspective, try to launch mentorship programs. And just within the last year, a couple of pastors have asked me what I think of them, and I've got to have a negative slant because none of them were successful with the way they tried to match people up. So I'm interested to try to change my paradigm to a more positive one for the church, at least, because I believe in it. I understand it. I've got my master's in applied behavioral science that talks about the only way to develop is by understanding yourself and having a mentor to help you to understand yourself. So it's not the sales part, application part I need.
Yep, some good practical stuff. Well, that's good. Let's hear from one other person, and then we'll let Marvin get at it here.
I've just given my 1-year notice at the church, getting ready to move on. Our mission is to make disciple makers who make disciple makers. I've got 11 coming up to take over. So this last year especially, I want to make sure I've mentored someone to step in and take over well.
Well, that's good. Transition is a not a well done thing in most ministry settings, and mentoring can be a part of that. So Marvin, let's have you get on to the next pieces you'd like to share today.
yeah, and Rod, we asked that very issue because well, just give me a few minutes, we'll get to that. Okay. Just so we're all on the same page, let's have a basic definition of mentoring. And what I want to talk with you about at this leadership mentoring style is transformational mentoring. So we're interested in mentoring that changes lives. So mentoring is really a relational experience in which one person empowers another person by sharing God-given resources. That was a definition from Paul Stanley and Robert Cousins, Robert Clinton, who really did a lot of work on this topic. And mentoring is one person having a positive impact on another person. It really comes down to this life and life relationship thing. I noticed Terry Dory's on here. Terry has called it mentoring as being a spiritually helpful friend. But what we want to make sure that we are really focusing in on how mentoring actually embraces the discipleship journey. So what I want to make sure is people get where I'm going with this, that mentoring is a tool. Too many people think mentoring and discipleship are one and the same, but it's not. Mentoring is a tool that God has designed to help advance discipleship at every stage of a person's journey. We're talking primarily on this webinar about the leadership level of a discipleship journey. So there's a kind of mentoring that is very important when people just come to faith in Christ. And as they begin to explore their own gifts and abilities within a local setting. But when it comes to developing leaders who are going to advance the kingdom of God, mentoring becomes a very significant tool at that level. So I just want to make sure everybody knows we're not talking about discipleship. We're a tool that helps people when they get to a level of discipleship as a kingdom follower. We're not talking about vocations here. We're talking about kingdom followers, and they've been equipped by God into leadership roles. We need to talk about how do we help mentor them so they really fine tune what God's developed in them. Another thing we want to talk about is that mentoring is not the same as coaching. And it's certainly not the same as counseling. Counseling looks back at people's problems, issues that are there, they're anchors in their life, And in a very intentional, usually very focused way, over a little longer time, people work these things out. Coaching has become a very significant, profitable business today. And so I just want to differentiate again between coaching. What I want to say up front is we use both some aspects of counseling and coaching and mentoring. Mentoring is a greater than either of those two things. So let's just look through. Coaching tends to focus just on skills, abilities, and information. And it uses questions almost exclusively, certainly primarily, but almost exclusively. The coach is not to engage much in the relational side. It's more about helping the person you're coaching through asking good questions, find the answers. And coaching does not have a life stage difference in it. Some of the very best coaches today are younger people than the people they're coaching, because all they have to do is skilled at asking the questions. So it doesn't require a life stage difference, and it doesn't require a gender issue. You can have women coaching men, men coaching women, because you don't get deep in the relationship. So the emotional side is not part of it. And most often there's a financial transaction involved, but mentoring is different. Mentoring focuses on the whole person. So when you begin mentoring someone, you're not just talking about their skills and abilities, you're interested in their whole person, but especially their character development. And this is what makes mentoring very different from coaching. It focuses in on the whole person and especially their character development. And it uses all the skills and techniques of coaching and counseling, but not to the technical degree that coaching and counseling are. Relationship is huge. True mentoring of trust, it doesn't happen overnight. So it takes some time to develop this relationship. And it's absolutely critical in a mentoring relationship that there's a high level of trust in the relationship. And there's always a life stage difference. So life stage is not just purely age. It tends to be where you are in your life journey. So are you married? Are you not? Have you started your career? Have you not? Are you a grandfather? Are you not? A grandmother? Are you not? These kinds of life stages make a big difference in the mentoring relationship. And so normally, and I think really always, whoever is the mentor should be at least one life stage ahead of the mentee. That's why I laughingly say I can almost mentor anybody today because I'm old and I've got lots of different experiences than most of the younger ones. So it's always that life stage that you need to think about. And then another thing you need to think about is it needs to be gender specific, because you do get involved in deep emotional settings and you talk about things that are deep heart level. And that's dangerous if it's cross-gender. Now, I would say there's one exception to that, and that's if a couple decides to mentor a young man or a young woman, then it's okay. But one-on-one, stay within your gender, and no financial transaction, because financial transactions keep you from actually being as honest and as open as you need to be sometimes with people, because you don't want to lose the client if you got a financial transaction going. And sometimes you need to lose the client if they're not willing to actually embrace what God's saying. Kind of focus is to try to model what Jesus did. And if you follow the story of Jesus, when he came onto the earth, he gathered a lot of followers, just people that, so to speak, crossed the line from skepticism to followership, or they came out of very religious context, became followers. And he did that for a number of years. And as best as we can trace Jesus' life story, about 2.5 years in, somewhere around 2.5 years in, he only was on planet Earth ministering for 3.5. He lived for 30 before. But as he began to focus in on leaving a group of leaders who are going to take the kingdom and extend it after he left, he spent a night in prayer, thinking through all these people that had been following, watching them, teaching them, watch how they responded. And after a night of prayer, he came and he chose 12 to be his apostles, so they could be with him in a more intentional way than ever before. And then if you read the story of Jesus, you'll find as he got closer to going to his last cycle down to Jerusalem, it actually began to develop that there were three that rose to the surface. And so we believe in Jesus' style of leadership development in the kingdom. Out of many people that are part of your life, you need to select a few and go deep with those few. So we talk about Jesus' philosophy of disciple making is you think big. You've got a circle of influence around you right now, all these people on this call. And we need to think big. All these people, think broadly. But out of that, who are the few that you're going to start by developing a close personal relationship with them? And then you're going to go deep. You're going to facilitate quality transferences. That's the way. And then, of course, out of those few, you release them and they do the same thing with others and with others. And that's how the kingdom grew. And it's kind of exciting, but also a little challenging, Dan, to believe that Jesus risked the whole advance of the kingdom on a few.
Yeah, when you think about it, he came to win the world, and he chose 12. And then he even specialized on 3, a little deeper within there. So, boy, that's informative to us.
Yeah, so it's really important we think about that we're not trying to do a lot here. We're trying to find those key people that if we make a deep investment in transformational mentoring, in other words, life change, they're going to be different as a result. If we do that, we are actually expanding God's kingdom the way Jesus designed it to be expanded. So as I've done this for years, Dan, I've come up with 4 words that kind of capsulize my mentoring relationships with people. And I just say these very quickly so that people might think about them. But these 4 words, and I'm talking about mentoring that's transformational and transferable. So we need to see life change in our mentees, but we need to embrace them in such a way that they can do with others what we've done with them. So that's transferable. So transformational, transferable, here are 4 words. Needs to be relational. Can't tell you how important that is. You can't manage unrelational people. And secondly, it needs to be intentional. This is what makes it different than just friendship, and it makes it different from a lot of stuff that goes on in our churches. We do a lot of good stuff. Well, not just our churches, in our life, but how intentional is it? And then added to intentionality is accountability. I think those 2 words go hand in hand, Dan. If you don't have anything intentional, how can you hold someone accountable?
Yeah.
And the other side is, if you're trying to hold people accountable for which there's been no intentionality, you just make them upset. And so it's really important, those 2 ideas, but it has to be within relational context of trust. So when we're mentoring people, we actually come up with intentional activities, intentional learning experiences, intentional changes that are needed. And then we also discuss what accountability is going to make that intentionality powerful. As often you as a mentor are the accountability person. And so you have to discuss that. How can I hold you accountable for what you intentionally want to do? And then the last thing is simple, or it's got to be reproducible. If you're not doing this in such a way that the person you're mentoring can do it with someone else, I think you're not doing it the way Jesus did it. And this is, of course, one of the histories of life in North America, especially. We think it has to be complicated and long and heavy for it to be important or helpful, but that's not Jesus' style. And so we want to make sure it's simple enough that what I'm doing with my mentee, with help and maybe a little coaching, my mentee can do it with someone else. And that's the 4 words. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so I just want to step in here, and what I'm hearing you say is that it's more than just having coffee with somebody.
Yes.
Sometimes we may have the idea, well, I'm mentoring so-and-so, we just get together and we just talk. Well, you're talking about something more intentional than that. That's what I'm hearing you saying. You're saying that this has to be more than simply getting together.
Absolutely. And that's why one of the most important things in developing this kind of mentoring is the selection process. Going back to what Rod talked about, you need to have enough time to watch a person, build relationship, enough to know as you're praying about that person, this is someone that God is saying to you, you need to invite into a mentoring relationship. And so that's so important. It's it's not just having a cup. Maybe the cup of coffee, Dan, is to get to know them well enough to know whether you want to do this or not.
Yeah.
And maybe every time you meet, it's over a cup of coffee. That's what happens to me. So many of the mentor meetings I have are in coffee shops. I mean, it's crazy.
Coffee's okay, but it's the conversation that's really important.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me, just a little aside, I found that that those are safe places for people. It's really bizarre to me. But in the midst of people having coffee and carrying on conversations, I've had mentoring relationships that are deep and powerful, and they'll tell me stuff. I go like, really? I hope no one else just heard that. And they just say it, like it's because they feel safe. Yeah. So that's what you need to do, is find a safe place, wherever that mentee feels safe and where they're willing to open up. But the conversations need to be very relational, and that two combination, intentional, accountable, for it to actually be a transformational mentoring experience. Otherwise, it's just a good friendship, and there's nothing wrong with those. Those are really good too, but we're trying to develop leaders. We're trying to develop people that are going to lead the kingdom forward. And like I said before, it doesn't matter whether they're a lawyer, a farmer, a doctor, a nurse, that's not the issue. Are they a kingdom person that God has given life to, new life to, that could become a leader to lead the kingdom forward? Mm-hmm. And most often that's in the midst of local churches or some parachurch organizations in a non-professional way.
So because this is so highly relational, it's got to work both ways. Mm-hmm. We as the mentor we have to have some certain ideas and principles in our heart. And then the mentee need to be willing to actually hear that and be open to this and want this. So it seems like it's got to be a two-way deal on this.
You're so right. I mean, I've learned over the years, Dan, that unless I often open up first, the relationship doesn't go anywhere. So you build this relational quality but then when you get talking about the things the mentee wants to discuss, often there's a sense that there's a little barrier, a little hesitancy. And so sometimes you have to say, well, let me tell you what that happened in my life, or I've experienced that. And you tell a little bit about your story, and all of a sudden it opens up huge vistas of conversation. And of course, that's what makes it different from coaching. And because you share your story, and often you need to initiate the sharing.
Yeah. So you have to model the behaviors and the openness and the trust and the transparency in order for the mentee to be willing to do that.
Absolutely. I can tell you that as I've studied the scriptures and tried to do this, the number one quality of a good mentor is that they model what it is to be a Christ-like person. That's the start. You have to have, so you need to be a maturing person yourself. But then the two skills that really, really rise to the surface are learning how to ask good questions and really listening well. And, most of us in our kind of world as leaders, we're better talkers than listeners.
Oh boy.
And we're just good at telling people stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not good at listening. Now that's of course a skill that counselors are. They're good listeners. And so we need to learn that gift. Someone has said that in a good mentoring relationship, 80% of the time of the mentor should be listening and 20% talking.
Hmm.
I can tell you from my experience, I tend to be about 50-50, and it's an area I keep working on
Hmm.
because I just know that's an area I need to listen more and listen well, actively listen. What is this person saying? What's the story below the surface and all that? So in the midst of this relationship, you're listening, you're asking good questions, and you're trying to help this person move towards more Christ-likeness. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, Marvin, my observation of many of the students that I have in our Crest Leadership Program is that we're leaders and we have things to tell people and we want to help people. So we talk a lot. And one thing we do in our Crest program is we really talk about listening. We want to urge all of you that you will probably have a lot more influence if you listen well and ask a good question that gets them talking, and then at the right moment you can share some things. But boy, it's if you come across lecturing or like, I got to get through this content, we have a discipleship course for you and we got to get through this with you, that will diminish your influence.
Oh, yeah. Discipleship courses, which we're talking about the difference between mentoring and discipleship, I think they have a place maybe early in a person's developmental process where it's a little more formal and there's something you work through together. But as you get towards more leadership, you got to get away from the courses and get to the heart and listening and so on. It's funny to me, Dan, and I've been so bad at this so many times, but do you ever do this? When person's talking, you're already forming what you want to say in response without listening to what they're really saying. I mean, I've done that so often with my wife, it's embarrassing, like I'm formed what I want to say next. And then she said, "You don't hear a thing I'm saying." I go like, "Yeah, I did." And then she says, "Well, tell me what I just said." And of course, then I'm totally embarrassed. I can't even remember what she said. But when you do that in a mentoring relationship, you do that a few times and you've lost the relationship. So you need to listen well, pause, and then ask the good question. And
so you can't be in a hurry with mentoring.
No.
It's a walking, sharing life, listening, and it's open-ended. Like your mentoring, it can be, how long it goes. You've got the time. So take the time to go deep. You mentioned go deep. Pick a few, go deep with them. And going deep means you can't go fast.
Right. We suggest, and I've practiced this, that the rhythm of a good mentoring relationship, Dan, is once a month for a year. And if you want to do it for a second year, then you decide, well, what are we going to discuss the second year? You can reset it up for a second year. So you're basically committed. We're going to meet 10 to 12 times, and we're going to discuss what the mentee wants to discuss. It's related to things they need to work on to become more like Jesus and fulfill the calling that Jesus has put in their life. So what are those things? We're going to discuss that. How can we help them understand it more? What do they need to do by way of life change to do it? And if you do it faster than once a month, maybe 3 weeks, but if you do it faster, you don't allow the Holy Spirit to do the work that needs to be done. And then it becomes more of a lecturing, you're just dumping content.
Yeah.
And that's not mentoring. That's not mentoring. No.
And you'd mentioned, though, that it has to be an accountable conversation. So when you meet the next month, you need to say, well, last month we talked about this and you said you were going to do this.
Right.
That linking the conversations together, that's a critical component as well.
No, absolutely. And that's why you have to take a few notes at the end of your meeting just to make sure you know where you left off. And what was the assignment? And often the assignments are mutual. In other words, for instance, if you're going to read something and discuss that, you as a mentor should read it as well as the mentee, so that when you get together, you both can talk about what God said to you out of that reading. What did you learn? You You need to be a learner. You need to model that you're under development too. It's not like you're perfect. It's not like you got it all together, but you are one stage down the road, at least that much. And so, yeah, it's really important that there's those intentional, accountable activities that lead to some assignments that then are reviewed the next time you get together. So that's the heart of what I think creates a good mentoring relationship. And like you said, it can go on for a long time. There's some guys in my life right now that I've been mentoring for 19, 20 years. Others, it's only 1 year. But I can tell you, every year we decide again, what are we going to focus on this year? It doesn't just slip into a nice friendship. Friendship is there, deep friendship, but it's amazing. I could just tell you an example of one young man that when I first met him, he was just graduated from college. We had just moved to the church. And I asked some of the leaders in the church, can you tell me some young men in the church that you think might become an elder in this church someday? Of course, that's an embarrassing thing to ask people in churches. They stumble around. They've never thought about that question. Not deeply anyway. Well, someone said, well, here's a guy I think might be that way. Remember when I started, he was shy, he was backward. He didn't embrace leadership much. I mean, you could see he had skills, he had career skills, but as far as Christian leadership, and I thought, I don't know if this is the right guy, but as I began to work with him, it became obvious. And I remember the day I told him one time, someday you're going to mentor people like I'm mentoring you. And he said, oh, I don't think so. Well, we've done dozens of people together. And he's done them on his own. And then I said to him one time, you're going to be an elder in this church someday. And he said, not a chance. Well, through just working with him and carry on, he became the chairman of the elders and did a great job. He's just finished two six-year terms. And I've had the joy of going on that journey with him and the things we've worked on, public speaking and so it's not totally just the heart, but it's at the core, it's about their heart transformation. And then you talk about other things like skills, knowledge in that context.
But he likely would never have become chairman of the elders without your conversations.
He'd never become an elder. He might never become a youth leader.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's get the long-term view, but do it in sections. So don't tie yourself into that if the person isn't making progress. So there's some people God's led me to mentor them. I've even prayed about it and asked, but then you get into it and you go like, oh, I can't wait till this year's over. Like this is not going anywhere fast. And so then you've got an out, you don't have to do it another year. And you don't even have to do it a full year if the person's not doing their homework assignments and not showing accountability. Anyway, we're getting ahead of the game here a bit, I think, Dan. Yeah.
Well, we've only got 50 minutes left, and friends, there's so much to mentoring that we can't cover it all in 60 minutes. This is an introduction to it. We actually have a deep dive, we call it, which is a whole course that Marvin and I put together, but it's Marvin's course content that will go into all kinds of details. So friends, if you're really interested in this and you do want to go deep with mentoring, at the end of our time here, we'll show you the deep dive that you can actually get a full course with Marvin, and it covers a lot of the questions here. But in this introductory piece here, Marvin, what else would be a good piece for people?
Well, I think one thing I do want to make sure we talk about briefly, but this is really a big part of the deep dive, is the intentional focus on the heart, the character, the motives of the potential leader or the existing leader. Most leadership development in our society focuses on the head and the hands. In other words, information and skills. And I think about what Rod was talking about. That's part of the problem. When you're just focusing on those things, you don't see the ongoing life development. You just see a better skilled person. So the mentoring in most of society, especially industry, is focused on making a better part of the team so the team can make more money or whatever. It's not about developing the person at a heart level. And of course, that's understandable in society. But in the life of the kingdom, the heart is the most important part. And it's the most neglected part of leadership development. So we have made, when I say we, MentorLink and what we've made a primary focus on developing the heart of the leader. And we do that by addressing 5 life transformations, heart transformations that need to happen. And we'll just talk about one briefly here, Dan, just so they get let their appetite.
Okay.
The most foundational heart transformation that needs to happen is helping a person move, as we think, from the left side to the right side. The left side being the natural style of leadership that comes out of brokenness and sin in our cultures. So in our culture, without Christ's transformation, leaders want to build their own kingdom, their own success. It's about me looking good, my success, what I can accomplish. And in Jesus' kingdom, it's not about that. It's about Jesus' success. It's about Jesus' kingdom success. And that's a tremendous transformation that all of us have to think about. So this is just the foundational one. We think you need to, how do you move from being someone who's promoting himself, his ministry, his organization, to someone who's seeking the glory of Christ and the promotion of God's kingdom that touches every area of life, ministry, and culture? It's a huge mouthful. Well, we have a way of walking people through that, and then a self-evaluation sheet to see, where am I in that journey, with some very powerful questions that you can use as you mentor people. So this is something, and the other 4 flow out of this. Our foundational belief is that, in an unfortunate way, in most cultures around the world, the prevailing local cultural leadership style has impacted the life of the kingdom. So in our churches, we embrace, in North America, for instance, we've embraced a CEO model of leadership. You have this leader who has certain power and authority and control and perks and all that. And we've embraced that in the life of the church. And that doesn't reflect Jesus' kingdom style of leadership. And so Jesus turns it on its head and says, that's not the way it is in my kingdom. In my kingdom, if you get position, it's so you can serve more people. That's the only reason you're given greater scope of leadership, is so you can serve more at a deeper level. And that's totally antithetical to the way most of us think. And so, just in a practical way, Dan, why is it when we build churches, the lead pastor gets the big office? Like, what's that all about? That's CEO model. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And he gets his own parking spot and gets a higher salary and all that. Like, it's all part of that kind of thinking that we've embraced out of our culture and brought into the kingdom. And I'm not saying I'm an expert on all, but I've experienced it all. And I know that most of it turns me off. But I still have some shades of brokenness. And so there's some of that I kind of like, and because it feeds my old nature instead of my redeemed nature. So we take people through these. So we have these 5 value shifts, and each value shift has a self-evaluation tool and questions. And we discuss that all in the deep dive.
So Marvin, what I'm hearing you saying, actually, as I'm listening and watching this content that you're talking about, is that if people in this call will go into the deep dive and engage the deep dive, it's actually going to be mentoring them.
Oh yeah, it starts off with the mentor.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We've got, you say you've got 5 significant value shifts that we as mentors have got to embrace and actually live out. And knowing the content, because I've done it with you, Marvin, I'm thinking, wow, that is needed with most people. Most potential mentors actually need to think deeply about those 5 things for themselves in order to mentor well. So I just think what you put together here, you and MentorLink team, has got the essence of what it means to be a successful transformational mentor. And it begins with your own transformation as to what kind of leadership you're actually talking about.
Yeah, and I just say one more thing, and then we should just talk about some tools and then some questions and answers, Dan.
Sure.
But The one thing I would say, and I say this with great humility, but deep belief, unless a person thinks clearly about these heart transformations as a mentor, it never becomes a priority in their life to mentor other leaders. It becomes another thing to do. I check it off because, well, I should do it. But when you have this transformation happening in your life, it becomes a passion, because this is how Jesus built the kingdom. And so now it becomes bubbling up to the level of high priority in my life, that I'm going to scan the horizon, I'm going to start praying, I'm going to start identifying people that I believe could become kingdom leaders.
Yes.
If someone walked the journey with them. And they not only could become a kingdom leader, but they become a reproducing kingdom leader. And so then you begin to work with those people in an intentional way. And it comes out of your heart transformation. And then that flows into your conversations with others. And so it's really, I agree, Dan, it's so significant to make this something more than another thing I do in my ministry.
Right. Yeah.
And when I say my ministry, I'm not necessarily talking about pastoral ministry, although I would love to see more pastors get serious about this. Because most pastors tell me they're too busy to mentor younger leaders. And I go like, really? Really? Like, have you read Jesus' life again? You know, like honestly? And so it really, and I've been a pastor, and I know the temptations to pour your life into doing stuff. And most of it's good stuff, but is it the main thing? And so that's, so we have a definition we work off, Dan, and then we can talk about some tools that we offer if you want. If a person wants to kind of get a feel for the flow that we think this definition and the expansion of the definition is really powerful. So we believe transformational mentoring has 4 dimensions to it. The first is you have to take the initiative to join someone's journey. So you as the mentor take the initiative. You make decisions with your will. I will set aside time. I will prayerfully look. I will do all these things because I'm a kingdom servant. So you take the initiative and you join someone's life journey. So that's the relational concept. It's not your journey. It's not about you. It's about them and joining their journey. And then you just recognize with humility, you're not the big deal. You're only one of the sources of help. You're one of God's instruments. But the instrument that you are in God's hands is a model. You can model what it is to be a Christ-like leader. So you become one. There's other things, the Holy Spirit, the Word of God, other Christians, books, blogs, there's all kinds of instruments God can use, but there's nothing like a human model that's powerful in a mentoring. And then of course we have the outcomes we're after. There's 2 outcomes we're looking for: to become all that God wants them to become, and to do what God wants them to do. And if people are thinking about this, I just think very powerful verses. Most people know the first 2 and forget the third. But Ephesians 2, 8, 9, and 10 tells us that God saved us for a purpose. It was a gift from him. It wasn't because we were searching God. God chose us. He saved us by his grace through faith. But it was a purpose. And the purpose was he calls you his handiwork, his work of art, his poema. And so we're looking to help people become more like Jesus, but to figure out what is it that God designed when he made them and gave them experiences. What is it? Because he did it for a purpose, and we need to help them find that sense of calling and purpose in the kingdom. And so this is, and this is fleshed out in a fuller way in Passing It On document, which I'll refer to in the tools here.
Yeah, so that's an in-depth understanding of what mentoring is. It's way more than what most people have thought, and yet it's not complicated either. So in some ways, Marvin, mentoring is easier than we think, but on the other hand, it goes deeper for us and for them than what we anticipated. But I know in talking with you, Marvin, you've talked many times about the joy you have with some of these people you've mentored over the years, what a
Oh, yeah.
deep, deep satisfaction and joy you have coming back to you for this investment that you put into them.
Yeah, I think, Dan, that's one of the greatest delights and joys when you do this and then you see your mentees mentoring others, and
Oh,
it gets into grandparents and great grandparents as far as the kingdom building.
mm,
And you just go, this is it. This is the way God designed it. And how in the world did I miss that for so many years and think I could mass produce
mm,
leader,
mm.
and you
Very
can't.
good.
And so
So
we,
yes,
I just want to make sure everybody knows that we have a website,
Yeah.
and all the tools on our website, and the website's listed there, mentorlink.org/Canada. All of them are under resources, the resources tab, and they're all free to use. And I urge you to use them. They're copyrighted in the sense you can't change them, but you can reproduce them as many copies as you want, as much as you want. What I just walked you through is called the Passing It On document. So if you look up on a resources, the Passing It On, that's the training tool. That's the training tool to train mentors. But what I'm showing you here are a couple tools that you can use in your mentoring conversations. So when you start in a mentoring conversation, if you're saying, oh, what are we going to talk about? Well, you're going to talk about things the mentee wants to talk about, but here's something you can do is take this document called the Leaders Covenant, developed by Mentorlink for the Lausanne Gathering in Cape Town, South Africa in 2010. Lausanne has used this all over the world. It's 10 statements of what it is to be a Christian leader. Aspirational statements. I will, and includes prayer and use of money and all integrity and all these things. And there's a statement that has a paragraph and some scripture verses, and you can actually discuss this with your mentee. And if you just slip up the next thing, Dan, there, I think we just created with the Leaders Covenant a sub-tool. It's part of the Leaders Covenant, but with each of those statements, we have 2 international speakers that talk about how that covenant statement impacted their life. So you have the statement, you have these 2 speakers, and then there's 5 questions attached to each of the 10 statements. So this is powerful, helpful, if you're developing a Christian leader, to walk through those 10 statements, listen to these international voices, and discuss the questions with your mentee. So the way I would say it is, you have a mentoring meeting, you say to the mentee, next time we meet, let's talk about Leaders Covenant number 1. And they can go online, download it, and then say, and when we come, after we've kind of watched it together, we'll discuss the 5 questions. You don't have to discuss them all. Pick 2 of the questions, whatever, but powerful discussions come out of these. So this is a simple tool that'll help them get going in leadership mentoring relationships.
Okay. Well,
And,
as we get toward the end of the hour here, we want to honor people's times. I want to let you know that there's more that Marvin's offering you. If you go to the Crest Leadership site, you can see here's the URL, crestleadership.ca. This is our page here, where if you scroll down to the bottom here, we come to the Academy, and there's leadership webinars, and here's the webinars that you're on, and here's the course. This is the course that we just are talking about now, the Principles and Practices of Mentoring. Principles of Mentoring, check it out now, click there. You can come right into this course here, and it'll tell you all the more content that is here to help you do this. So friends, if you really want to get into the mentoring and do it well, I urge you to listen more to what Marvin's got to say, and he's got it all out here in the course. And then at the end of the course, there's an amazing offer Marvin makes to you. First of all, he's going to send you a free book written by Stacy Reinhardt that has a lot of this in it. But the real amazing offer that Marvin is making is that only for those who are willing to actually do the deep work in the deep dive, he is willing to mentor you and help you actually do it. And friends, that is an amazing offer to be able to talk as long as you need to with Marvin, so that you can actually get going and do this well. So I'm pretty pumped about offering this this training tool to you that can make all the difference for you and your effectiveness, especially looking at our group here. We are all mature leaders. You've got things to share. You just might need some help in knowing how to do that well so that it's transformational.
And Dan, if I could just add, so they don't think they're overwhelmed, the course is set up with 12 5 to 7 minute videos. So the videos work, and then there's worksheets that go with it that expand and make you do some homework yourself. And the offer of me coaching you in your mentoring role is genuine. We've developed a small team here in Canada. One of the team members is on this call right here watching me, Terry Dory, but it'll be me or one of my teammates that will walk with you to get you going. The biggest challenge is to get going and just get a feel of the joy of doing it and having someone you can ask questions of and say, like, I did this, but so that's a genuine offer, myself or one of our team members. And we'd love to serve you. Love to serve you.
Yeah. That is really good. So this deep dive is for you, to help you really get this and start practicing it. Have a live coaching from Marvin. Wow. This is the best offer on mentoring I've seen anywhere. So I just want to commend my good friend Marvin to you. Now, are there any questions that others might have here at the end? We're at the end of our hour, so we understand some may need to go. But are any quick questions that somebody might have here? Just go ahead and speak up.
I don't want to do all the talking here. I'm the high extrovert, maybe in the room. I'm not sure, but I from what I hear, the key still, and maybe the fault of the corporate, was that they sort of forced the connection.
Right.
I think the anxiety in me is how to find that good friendship connection. Does it start with friendship and develop, or it sounds more like it's intentional with Marvin, your example of asking the church who here's got the potential to be a leader, and then you approaching them and awkwardness and all the rest of it. So it wasn't a relationship initially, you built it. And I think that's where it fails. Like some programs try to match people up based on maybe their interest or something, right? And it's so phony. It doesn't develop into anything deep. And even in churches, I'm talking, not just corporate. So I know you're not going to be able to answer that here, but just that's the anxiety in my heart, is to try to figure out, how do you pick that person that you don't sound like, hey, I'm better than you, I can mentor you. And the other question is just on the connection between coaching and discipleship. That's all. I'll stop.
Well, what I would say, Rod, just to calm your heart, there are different ways relationships develop. So I'm not here to force one way. It could be you actually do it. I think that's a person that I would like to get to know, and you build the relationship, and then you offer, would you like to go on a mentoring journey with me? But sometimes they're already your friends. You already know them. And then so I think there's a variety of ways, but you have to get to a spot of relationalness, prayerfulness, and then asking, would you be willing? Would you enjoy going on a mentoring journey with me? And you describe it. This is what it would look like. Would you give me that honor, that privilege? That's the way I always do it. Would you give me the privilege of going on your life journey? I see in you things that God is doing. And I just love that opportunity. I think you do it as you scan your friendships, your relationships, and tell you it works if you've prayed about it.
Very good. We have actually, part of the course is how to find a mentee.
Right.
And it's in the deep dive. So there'll be more details there and more specifics as well. Anybody else got a question or a closing comment? Donna.
I do have a question. So I work at Pregnancy Care Canada, and I do a fair amount of casual mentoring of new directors. Every year there's like 15 or so new directors, and I have calls with them, and to varying degrees, I do provide some mentorship, but it's not, I don't have the bandwidth to officially enter into what you're talking about. But will this deep dive still be of some benefit in what I'm doing? Some directors I do meet with monthly. Other ones, it might be only 3 or 4 times in the year, or maybe twice in the year. So is what you're teaching going to translate to what I'm doing? And I'm also doing a bit of coaching too. Like I do a little bit of coaching, a little bit of mentoring. It's sort of a mishmash with these new leaders.
Don, it's good to see you. I remember when you were in Crest. And what I would say to you is we have a tool that you could do it with a group. So if out of those 12 or so that you get annually, you could invite them. Let's form a little mentoring group, and you could meet with them monthly. And it's based on the Leaders Covenant, but it's got a devotional guide. It's got questions that the individual answers and brings to the discussion. Okay, so you could do that, and there's group discussion questions, and then there's follow-up intentional activities. So you could do that, maybe not for all, but maybe what if half of those people joined you in a journey like that? The power of that would be unbelievable.
Yeah, I already do meet with them monthly. We have a monthly Zoom call. So maybe just put a little more structure into those calls.
And I think you'd find it really, really. So if you go to our website, it's under Leaders Covenant. It's under that rubric, and it's called Leading Like Jesus. Just go and take a look, and it's about 70 pages, but just read it and you'll see it. And I say that to anybody. If there's pastors on here and you've got some people in your church that you think could be a leader, and you could do that in a mixed group, by the way, because it's not one-on-one quite so much. Take them through that Leading Like Jesus tool and watch them flourish. Can I just make one little comment, Dan, as we kind of bring this to a close?
Yes.
God, through a very interesting set of circumstances, has opened a door for me to train members of the Christian medical community in India in mentoring. Okay. So we're doing that on, they do it on Thursday nights, 2 hours every Thursday night for 5 weeks. So I just got off the call this morning from one of the groups, and a gentleman who is in charge of a division of the Christian Medical College in Vellore, who has 75 people reporting to him, said to me today, when I read the transformational values, it was like God shot me through the heart, because I didn't realize how much I was trying to build my own kingdom. And he said, God is changing my whole way of thinking, how I deal with my staff. And it's just, let God massage your heart, and it spills over to desire to help others in the same journey. And always ask for the privilege. Would you give me that privilege? And then describe what it looked like.
Wow. So this mentoring is transformational for the mentee and also for you.
Absolutely.
God is actually working on both of you in this process. So let's engage it with joy, because this is the way of Jesus. This is how he did it. Let's step in, let's get in step with him and follow him. So friends, very good to have you on the call today. God be with each of you, and we'll send you an email following here with some of the links in here that you can know how to go forward with this as well. So really good. Thank you, Marvin, for a really good webinar today. And I pray that this will result in many people getting transformational mentoring.
God bless. My contact information is on our website. So look on there, you can contact me.
Mentorlink.org.
/Canada.
Ah, okay. Good. Okay, friends. Till next month. We have another webinar next month. We'll see you.